My future was a lie, a forced marriage to the disgraced dock worker, Raymond Hartley. My parents, Walter and Phyllis Oakes, had traded me for status. His greedy relatives, Harold and Calvin Danforth, gloated. But at the altar, Raymond fixed his gaze on me, then declared, "I am Raymond Vanderbilt, the true heir." The collective gasp was deafening. My stolen world exploded into dizzying possibility. Subscribe and comment where you are watching from, because the person everyone ignored saved someone else's entire world. My days at home felt like living in a beautiful crumbling shell. The Oakes house, once the jewel of our neighborhood, now held more dust than grandeur, but my mother, Phyllis, insisted on maintaining the illusion. I spent my mornings tending to the rose garden, a small rebellion of beauty against the greying reality, my hands calloused from the thorns. My father, Walter, spent his days in his study, muttering about lost investments and the cruel turns of fortune. Their whispers always led back to the same conclusion. Our family needed a lifeline, and I, Margaret, was to be it. "A girl of your standing," Mother would sigh, her gaze drifting over my plain dresses, "should be marrying into a suitable family, not this." The "this" was Raymond Hartley, the man my father had deemed a necessary evil. He was a dock worker, they said, a man of no consequence, a disgrace. The very mention of his name brought a grimace to my mother's lips and a tired shrug from my father. They never said why Raymond was necessary, only that it would secure our future, and by extension, their fragile grip on their fading social position. I was a transaction, a business deal disguised as a wedding. I knew little of Raymond Hartley, only the rumors my family allowed to trickle down to me. He was rough. He was uneducated. He had a questionable past. His uncle, Harold Danforth, and his cousin, Calvin Danforth, were the source of most of these whispers. They were a prominent family, known for their sharp tongues and even sharper business dealings, and they delighted in speaking ill of Raymond. "A black sheep," Calvin once sneered at a tea party, loud enough for me to hear, better forgotten. I often wondered what Raymond had truly done to earn such venom. My own feelings were a tangled knot of despair and quiet resentment. I had dreams of a life filled with books and gentle companionship, not a forced union with a stranger whose hands were said to be permanently stained with coal dust and whose mind was supposedly as simple as his work. My parents' constant reminders of my duty, of the sacrifices they had made for me, weighed heavily on my heart. They painted him as a stepping stone, a means to an end, a man to be tolerated for the sake of appearances and solvency. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I was returning from the market, my basket heavy with necessities, I saw him for the first time up close. He wasn't at the docks as I had always imagined. He was on the main street near the old library of all places. He was dressed simply, but his clothes were clean and well kept. He was talking to a kindly old gentleman, the owner of the local bookstore, Mr. Henderson. I expected a boisterous laugh, a crude gesture, something to confirm my parents' descriptions. Instead, Raymond Hartley listened intently, his head tilted, a thoughtful expression on his face. His voice, when he spoke, was low and even, not the loud, unrefined tone I'd been led to expect. Mr. Henderson nodded slowly, a look of respect in his eyes. What truly surprised me, though, was what Raymond held in his hand. It wasn't a tool or a ledger from the docks. It was a well-worn, leather-bound book, the kind with small, intricate lettering I recognized as philosophy or ancient history. He tucked it carefully under his arm, gave a small, polite bow to Mr. Henderson, and then turned to walk away. His eyes, for a fleeting moment, met mine across the crowded street. They held a depth and a quiet intelligence that rattled every preconceived notion my family had so carefully built around him. The man I was forced to marry was nothing like they said, and as he walked away, a faint, metallic glint caught the sunlight from his left hand, almost hidden by his sleeve, before disappearing into the bustle of the street. It was a ring, an old, heavy signet ring, far too elegant for a simple dock worker. The wedding morning arrived cloaked in a damp fog, mirroring the chill in my heart. My mother, Phyllis, fluttered around me, adjusting the lace on my gown, her face flushed with a peculiar mix of forced excitement and thinly veiled relief. "This is for the best, Margaret," she repeated, more to herself than to me, her voice tight. My father, Walter, gave me a somber kiss on the forehead, his eyes avoiding mine, the weight of his sacrifice heavier on him than on me, it seemed. I felt like a parcel, carefully wrapped and ready to be delivered. The grand church, usually filled with joyful echoes, felt cavernous and hushed. Our dwindling circle of family acquaintances sat scattered among the pews, their whispers barely stirring the heavy air. But closer to the front, I saw them. Harold Danforth, Raymond's uncle, sat with a self-satisfied smirk, his corpulent figure nearly spilling into the aisle. Beside him, Calvin Danforth, his son, was practically preening, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting applause for Raymond's supposed fall from grace. They both looked as though they were attending a coronation for themselves rather than a marriage. My feet felt heavy as I began the walk down the aisle, the long white train of my dress a burden rather than a celebratory flourish. Each step was a quiet protest, a surrender. I focused on the stained glass window at the far end, avoiding the pitying glances and the triumphant smirks. My mind drifted, strangely, to that brief glimpse of Raymond by the bookstore, the thoughtful expression, the elegant ring, the unexpected book in his hand. It was a fleeting moment, but it stood out, a small, vibrant splash of color in the otherwise grey landscape of my resignation. Then I was at the altar. Raymond stood waiting, not in the coarse clothes of a dock worker, but in a well-tailored suit that fit him with understated elegance. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his eyes, when they met mine, held a depth I couldn't quite decipher, a hint of apology, a flicker of something strong and unyielding. The officiant, a kindly old man with spectacles perched on his nose, began the ceremony, his voice a gentle drone against the background of my thudding heart. We exchanged our initial vows, a string of words I spoke without truly feeling, my gaze fixed on the altar flowers. Then came the moment I dreaded most, the part that felt like a public declaration of my impending misery. The officiant paused, his voice gaining a solemn gravity. "If anyone present knows any reason why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever. Hold their peace." A heavy silence descended upon the church, broken only by a small cough from the back. My parents shifted uneasily. The Danforths' smirks widened, anticipating nothing but the sealing of their victory. Then Raymond moved. He didn't look at me, but his gaze swept slowly over the faces in the congregation, resting for a long, deliberate moment on Harold and Calvin. His expression, usually so guarded, hardened with a resolve I had never witnessed. A ripple of murmuring started, quickly hushed by the sheer force of his presence. And then his voice, clear and strong, filled the silence. "I do!" A collective gasp echoed through the church. My head snapped up, my eyes wide with shock. What was he doing? Was this a last-minute refusal? My mother made a strangled sound beside me. The Danforths' faces, just moments ago so smug, now contorted in confusion, then alarm. Raymond turned to the officiant, his eyes alight with a controlled fire. "I do know a reason," he stated, his voice ringing with quiet authority. I am not Raymond Hartley, the disgraced dock worker you believe me to be. My name is Raymond Vanderbilt, and I am the rightful heir to the Vanderbilt fortune." The words hung in the air, shattering the hushed reverence of the ceremony. My breath caught in my throat. Raymond Vanderbilt, the name itself was a legend, synonymous with immense wealth and power. The disgraced dock worker was a Vanderbilt? Around me, the congregation erupted in a stunned clamour, a cacophony of gasps, whispers, and outright exclamations. My parents looked utterly mortified, their faces draining of all colour. But Harold and Calvin Danforth, their faces ashen, now looked less surprised and more terrified, as if a ghost had just walked into the room. Raymond, with a calm dignity that belied the chaos he had unleashed, reached into his jacket pocket. From his jacket pocket, Raymond produced a thick stack of papers held together with a simple clip and a worn, leather-bound diary. He handed the papers to the bewildered officiant, then held up the diary for all to see. "These are copies of my true birth certificate, authenticated by independent notaries, alongside sworn affidavits from trusted family servants who witnessed my grandfather's will. And this," he said, tapping the diary, "is my grandfather's personal journal, detailing his intentions to leave me, Raymond Vanderbilt, his entire estate, and expressing his profound disappointment in his manipulative brother, Harold Danforth, and his scheming son, Calvin." A wave of disbelief rippled through the church. My own mind raced, trying to reconcile the disgraced dock worker with the man speaking with such quiet power, holding documents that spoke of unimaginable wealth. The whispers grew louder, morphing into a crescendo of astonished exclamations. Many craned their necks to see the papers the officiant now held, his spectacles slipping down his nose as he scanned the documents, his face paling with each word he read. Harold Danforth, his face a grotesque mask of fury and fear, leaped to his feet. "This is preposterous! Lies! He's a fraud, a common opportunist. This is Hartley, the disgraced dock worker, trying to usurp what's not his." His voice, usually so booming, was now shrill and trembling. Calvin, beside him, was utterly mute, his eyes wide and vacant, as if he'd just seen a ghost. Their arrogance, once so heavy in the room, now crumbled into panicked desperation. Raymond simply turned to face his uncle, a look of profound sorrow, mixed with steely resolve, in his eyes. "The true nature of your treachery, Uncle Harold, and your son's complicity, is fully laid out in the official complaint I filed with the authorities this morning. Copies have also been delivered to every major newspaper. The detailed accounts of how you falsified documents, manipulated my grandfather's final wishes, and systematically slandered my name to justify my disinheritance are now public record. My years of disgrace were spent quietly gathering the absolute truth, ensuring that when I spoke, there would be no doubt." My parents, Walter and Phyllis, were utterly mortified. My father had sunk into his seat, his face a sickly shade of green, his jaw slack. My mother, usually so composed, looked as though she might faint, her hands gripping her handbag like a lifeline. The entire church seemed to hold its breath, witnessing the dramatic unraveling of a carefully constructed lie. Their disdain for Raymond, their callous bartering of my future for a man they believed beneath them, was exposed for all to see. The humiliation was palpable, a stark and public indictment of their avarice and short-sightedness. The officiant, having finished a hasty review of the documents, looked up, his voice barely a whisper. "The evidence here, it appears to be entirely legitimate. Mr. Vanderbilt. Raymond, your claim seems undeniable." He adjusted his spectacles, a flicker of awe in his eyes as he looked at Raymond, then at me. Then Raymond turned to me, his gaze softening. a hint of something protective and earnest in his eyes. "Margaret," he said, his voice now gentle, "I am deeply sorry for the deception. It was necessary to ensure justice, but never intended to cause you further pain. I understand if you wish to halt these proceedings." My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. The moment I could walk away, free from a forced marriage, free from the Oakes family's financial schemes. But as I looked at Raymond, no longer a disgraced dock worker, but Raymond Vanderbilt, the honorable man who had meticulously sought justice, a man of integrity and surprising depth, I saw something else. I saw the quiet intelligence I'd glimpsed by the bookstore. I saw a man who had endured injustice with dignity. My future, once a bleak landscape, suddenly stretched before me, shimmering with unexpected possibilities. I met his gaze, a quiet strength blooming within me. "No, Raymond," I said, my voice steady, surprising myself. "Let us proceed." A murmur of renewed wonder swept through the church. The officiant, regaining his composure, picked up his book, his voice now imbued with a fresh solemnity. The ceremony continued. My hand, which Raymond had held lightly through the entire ordeal, now felt secure and warm in his. The world outside the altar, with its stunned gasps and furious whispers, seemed to fade as I stood there, taking my place beside the man who had just saved his world, and, unexpectedly, mine. My quiet affirmation seemed to echo through the suddenly hushed church, cutting through the stunned murmurs. The officiant, his face still a mixture of shock and profound fascination, cleared his throat and continued the ceremony, his words now imbued with a new-found urgency. He sped through the remaining vows, his gaze flickering between us as if we were characters in a rapidly unfolding play. My hand, still clasped by Raymond's, felt the faint tremble of his resolve, a shared vibration of the momentous decision we had just made. The simple "I do" that sealed our union felt heavy with a significance far beyond mere tradition. As the final blessing was given and the officiant pronounced as husband and wife, a collective exhale swept through the pews. Raymond turned to me, his dark eyes searching mine, a small, genuine smile finally gracing his lips. It was a smile that spoke of relief, of promise, and of a quiet, deep understanding. He gently squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of the unexpected partnership that had just begun. The aftermath was a whirlwind. My parents, Walter and Phyllis, were a tableau of utter devastation. My father, who had clung so desperately to his pride, now looked utterly broken, slumped in his seat, the weight of his poor decisions and the revelation of his daughter's disgraceful match now turning into a truly mortifying public spectacle. My mother, usually so sharp-tongued and composed, merely stared blankly ahead, her social ambition and cruel belittling of Raymond completely backfiring in the most spectacular way. Their faces were etched with a humiliation that far surpassed any financial ruin, a just consequence for their treatment of me. Across the aisle, the Danforths were in full flight mode. Harold, red-faced and sputtering, was attempting to push his way out of the pew, muttering threats and accusations under his breath. Calvin, his arrogant sneer replaced by outright terror, seemed to shrink into his expensive suit, trying to disappear. But two stern-looking gentlemen who had been sitting discreetly in the back now moved forward with purposeful strides, intercepting Harold and Calvin near the side exit. I saw one of them flash a badge, and the word "arrest" hung unspoken in the air, though the distance muffled their precise words. Raymond had indeed prepared everything, meticulously and justly. Raymond, my husband, still held my hand, his presence a comforting anchor in the swirling chaos. He wasn't gloating, not even a flicker, just a quiet, dignified composure that spoke volumes about his character. He hadn't just exposed a fraud, He had reclaimed his identity with grace and strength, and without malice, only resolute justice. As we walked back down the aisle, no longer a procession of quiet despair, but one of unexpected triumph, the murmurs were different. They were whispers of awe, of scandal, of the astonishing news spreading like wildfire. My new husband, Raymond Vanderbilt, nodded courteously to various stunned faces, acknowledging their presence, but his eyes kept finding mine. A sense of peace settled over me, a feeling I hadn't known I was capable of in this forced union. The man I had been sold to, the man my family deemed a disgrace, was the truest, most honorable person in the room. We reached the church doors, and the crisp autumn air hit me, a refreshing change from the heavy atmosphere within. Ahead, a sleek, dark car awaited, a stark contrast to the humble carriage my parents had arranged. Raymond opened the door for me, his touch gentle. As I stepped in, I glanced back at the retreating figures of Harold and Calvin Danforth, now being led away by the authorities, their cries of protest swallowed by the growing crowd. The world was righting itself piece by unexpected piece, and I was stepping into it, not as a pawn, but as a partner in an entirely new, astonishing chapter. The sleek car moved smoothly through the quiet streets, a stark contrast to the earthquake that had just occurred within the church walls. I sat beside Raymond, the silence between us profound, yet no longer strained with dread. It hummed with possibility, with the sheer weight of everything that had transpired. I watched the autumn trees pass by, their leaves a riot of gold and crimson, feeling as though my own world had just burst into vibrant, unexpected color. "Margaret," Raymond finally said, his voice soft, turning to face me, "I am truly sorry you were subjected to such a public spectacle. It was never my intention to cause you distress, only to secure justice and to free you from a future that was not of your choosing." He looked directly into my eyes, and I saw genuine concern there, not the detached formality I might have expected from a powerful man. "It was a lot to take in," I admitted, a small, tremulous smile touching my lips. "But I understand why you had to do it this way, and I am not distressed. Surprised, yes, but not distressed." I found myself feeling a strange sense of calm, a peace that had been absent from my life for far too long. He had given me my freedom, not by rejecting me, but by claiming his own truth, and in doing so, offered me a true partnership. Over the next few weeks, the world truly turned on its head. The newspapers, initially filled with the sensational story of the Vanderbilt heir's altar revelation, soon shifted to detailed accounts of Harold and Calvin Danforth's elaborate schemes. Raymond's meticulous evidence left no room for doubt. The Danforths' carefully constructed empire crumbled, their assets seized, their names irrevocably linked with fraud and deception. Legal proceedings moved swiftly, exposing their decades of manipulation and the cold-hearted way they had tried to erase Raymond from history. Their fall from grace was absolute and entirely deserved, a complete public disgrace that left them with nothing but their tarnished reputations. My parents, Walter and Phyllis Oakes, bore the brunt of their own misjudgment. Their social circle, once so vital to their sense of self, quickly evaporated. No one wanted to be associated with the Oakes family, whose avarice and cruelty in attempting to marry off their daughter for money had been so starkly exposed. Their financial struggles deepened, but without the veneer of social standing they clung to so desperately there was nothing left to protect. They lived with the quiet, crushing weight of their choices, a humiliation more profound than any public outcry. I harbored no ill will, only a sorrow for the choices they had made. Life often throws such unexpected curves, doesn't it? And since you've made it this far, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps me keep bringing stories like this. It certainly helped me appreciate the quiet moments after all that drama. Raymond, meanwhile, stepped into his rightful place with an effortless grace that belied the years he had spent in the shadows. He was brilliant, astute, and commanded respect naturally. He not only reclaimed the Vanderbilt fortune, but began to steer it in new, honorable directions. Our home, a grand estate that dwarfed the Oaks' crumbling house, became a place of quiet dignity and warmth. We spent evenings in his vast library, him sharing stories of his meticulous search for justice, me introducing him to poets and novelists he hadn't had time for. Our marriage grew from a foundation of shared integrity and mutual respect into a deep, abiding partnership. There was no grand, passionate beginning, but a slow, steady blooming of affection and understanding. Raymond valued my intelligence, my opinions, my quiet strength. He had been a dock worker by necessity, but a scholar and an honorable man by nature. He showed me a world of possibilities I had never dreamed of, where my voice was heard and my happiness mattered. We built a life rooted in honesty and dignity, a testament to triumph born from the ashes of deceit. My future, once stolen and bartered, had been returned to me, richer and more beautiful than I could have ever imagined, alongside the truest, most unexpected partner I could ask for. The sleek car had taken me away from the chaos, but it wasn't long before I found myself drawn back to the familiar, yet now desolate, street corner where my family's crumbling house stood. I had spent a few days at a quiet inn Raymond had arranged, a place for reflection away from the whirlwind. But a part of me felt a tug towards the place I'd called home, however hollow it had become. The Oaks residence, once echoing with my mother Phyllis's ambitious plans and my father Walter's weary sighs, now felt like a silent tomb. The rose garden I'd tended was starting to droop, neglected. My parents, wrapped in their disgrace, had withdrawn entirely, their voices hushed, their pride shattered. I wore one of my older practical wool coats, its warmth now a comfort against the chill of the rapidly cooling autumn air, and certainly not the grand attire of a Vanderbilt wife. I was contemplating the wilting roses when a familiar dark vehicle pulled to a stop beside the curb. The door opened and Raymond emerged, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. He was dressed in a pristine dark suit, the fabric a rich deep hue that spoke of quality and effortless elegance. It clung perfectly to his broad shoulders, a stark contrast to my simple, faded garment and the general air of decay around me. He looked every inch the magnate, a man who commanded his world, and yet his expression as he approached was gentle, almost tentative. "Margaret," he said, his voice carrying a quiet concern that warmed me despite the external chill. He held no judgment, only an understanding that pierced through the public spectacle and into the private sorrow. "Raymond," I replied, a small smile finding its way to my lips. It was strange to see him here, amidst the wreckage of my old life, a living testament to the new one that awaited. He stopped a respectful distance away, his gaze sweeping over the neglected garden, then settling on me. "I understand you chose to return here for a time," he began, his tone thoughtful, "to deal with things." He didn't need to elaborate. The things were the shattered pride, the financial ruin, the overwhelming shame my parents were now experiencing. I wanted to ensure you were comfortable, personally, that you had what you needed. Then he reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a slim leather wallet. He opened it, revealing a neat stack of crisp banknotes. He extended a hand towards me, the money offered with a solemn grace, not as charity, but as a practical gesture from a partner. "This is for you, Margaret, for whatever you might require. to help you make your transition, to ensure your immediate needs are met, independent of current circumstances. His eyes held a deep sincerity, a clear desire to provide, to protect. I looked at the money, then back at Raymond's kind face. The temptation to take it, to alleviate some of the crushing weight I knew my parents were feeling, flickered for a moment. But then a quiet strength settled within me. Raymond had saved me from being a pawn, and I wasn't about to become one again, even in a different way. My dignity, my independence, was something I fiercely held on to even now. I gently shook my head, my smile widening slightly. "No, Raymond," I said, my voice soft but firm, meeting his gaze directly. "Thank you. Truly. But no." I took a deep breath, the scent of damp earth and fading roses filling my lungs. "I will make my own way. I always have, in my own fashion, and I believe I still can." The crisp banknotes remained untouched in his open hand, suspended between his world of boundless means and my quiet resolve. The crisp banknotes remained untouched in his open hand, suspended between his world of boundless means and my quiet resolve. Raymond's brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but also a deeper spark of appreciation for my stubborn independence. He slowly withdrew the money, tucking it back into his wallet with a thoughtful expression. "I understand," he said simply, his voice low. "Your strength, Margaret. It's something I've come to admire." He stepped a little closer then, his gaze sweeping over the wilted rose bushes, the peeling paint on the window frames, and the general air of neglect clinging to the Oaks home. "But what of your parents?" he asked, his tone gentle. "Their situation? It is quite dire." I felt a familiar ache in my chest. My parents, Walter and Phyllis, had hurt me deeply, trading my future for their own fleeting status, but they were still my family. I had seen the vacant despair in my mother's eyes, the defeated slump of my father's shoulders. Their arrogance had been a shield against their own fears, a desperate attempt to cling to a world that was already crumbling beneath them. They had believed their actions were necessary, however misguided, however cruel, for the family name. They made their choices, I acknowledged, my voice soft, looking away from him, towards the darkening sky. And they are suffering the consequences, the public humiliation. It is a heavy burden. I paused, gathering my thoughts, trying to articulate the tangle of emotions within me. "But Raymond," I continued, turning back to him, meeting his steady gaze. "Their mistakes, their desperation, even their cruelty towards me. It came from a place of fear, not malice, not like the Danforths." He listened intently, his expression unreadable, but I sensed his full attention. "They truly believed they were doing what was best for the family," I explained, choosing my words carefully. "They were blinded by their own pride, by the fear of losing everything. They were weak, yes, but not evil." I took a deep breath. "The Danforths actively conspired. They slandered your name. They stole your inheritance through calculated deceit. My parents, they merely stumbled through a series of poor choices, driven by desperation and a misguided sense of duty. They thought they were ensuring our survival, even at my expense. It was wrong, unspeakably so, but born of a different kind of darkness than the Danforths." I stepped towards him, my hands clasped in front of me, pleading with my eyes. "Raymond, you have brought justice to those who truly wronged you. You have reclaimed what was stolen. The Danforths are facing the full extent of the law, and that is right. But my parents, their public disgrace, their financial ruin, it is already a crushing weight. Could there be a way for them to recover some measure of quiet dignity? Not wealth, not their old standing, but simply a path to rebuild their lives away from the harsh spotlight. They are broken, not malicious schemers. They have learned their lesson, I believe, in the most painful way possible. I wasn't asking for money, not directly. I was asking for compassion, for a recognition of their human frailty rather than their unforgivable actions. I was asking if their future could hold something beyond utter destitution and unending shame. Raymond looked at me, his eyes now unclouded, a profound shift occurring in their depths. He considered my words, not just hearing them, but truly understanding. The corner of his mouth twitched, not in a smile, but in something akin to deep thought, perhaps even empathy. He had faced betrayal far greater than mine, yet he listened to my plea for leniency, for a different kind of justice for the people who had sold me. He began to nod slowly, his gaze softening, a nascent understanding dawning in his eyes. Raymond considered my plea, his dark eyes no longer just understanding, but truly weighing the depths of my words. He nodded slowly, then a thoughtful, almost serene expression settled on his face. "You are right, Margaret," he said, his voice imbued with a quiet power. "There is a difference between calculated malice and profound misjudgment. Justice should be tempered with understanding, where appropriate." He looked back at the dilapidated house, then at me. "I believe I can offer a solution that allows your parents to rebuild, not their former facade, but a genuine foundation for their lives, one that perhaps even serves this community which has witnessed so much." The next few weeks were a testament to Raymond's remarkable efficiency and quiet influence. He moved with a purpose that was both gentle and unstoppable. Instead of simply handing my parents money, which I knew they might misuse or which would only further fuel the gossip, Raymond sought out an old, abandoned mill building on the outskirts of town. It had been an eyesore for years, a crumbling shell that everyone wished would simply disappear. He quietly purchased the property, placing it in a newly formed trust managed by a neutral, respected town committee. Then he initiated a comprehensive renovation project. It wasn't about lavish spending, it was about thoughtful restoration. The old mill, once a symbol of the town's industrial past, was transformed into a vibrant community hub. There were spaces for adult literacy classes, a small workshop for local artisans to sell their crafts, and a spacious room for town meetings and charitable events. It was designed to serve, to uplift, to connect. He then offered my parents, Walter and Phyllis Oakes, the opportunity to manage the new Oakwood Community Mill, as it was named. The offer came with a modest but steady income and clear responsibilities. He made it clear that this was not a handout, but a chance to contribute meaningfully to their town, to earn their dignity back through honest effort. I saw my parents for the first time in weeks when Raymond and I visited the nearly completed mill. Walter, who had been so broken, looked at the renovated stone walls and new timber beams with a flicker of something new in his eyes. Purpose. Phyllis, whose social ambitions had caused so much pain, walked through the bright, airy rooms, her posture slowly straightening, as if she could finally breathe again, free from the crushing weight of pretense. She was no longer focused on what others thought of her lavish parties, but on how a group of local seamstresses could use the new workshop space. The news of the Oakwood Community Mill and the Oaks' unexpected new role in managing it spread like wildfire through our little town. At first, there was confusion, then disbelief, and finally a grudging respect. Neighbors who had once whispered about the Oakes family's sudden downfall, who had openly snickered at their disgraced status, now watched as Walter meticulously organized the new library section and Phyllis warmly greeted local women signing up for craft classes. I often saw them from a distance, perhaps while Raymond and I were driving through town. My parents, working side by side, no longer chasing fleeting social standing, but building something real and valuable. Their faces, though still etched with the lessons of the past, now carried a quiet contentment I had never seen before. The transformation of the Oakes family, from ridiculed social climbers to respected community figures, was a testament to Raymond's profound generosity and my own belief in their capacity for change. One afternoon, as I watched my mother assist an elderly woman with a book selection, two of our old neighbors, Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Cobb, stood across the street, their mouths agape. They had once been among the most vocal critics, delighted in my family's struggles. Now they simply stared, unable to reconcile the industrious, genuinely helpful Phyllis with the snobbish woman they remembered. Their expressions were a mixture of awe and utter bewilderment, their gossip replaced by speechless observation. They had come to mock, but left simply marveling. It seemed even the most cynical hearts could be touched by a humble act of kindness. The two neighbors, Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Cobb, stood across the street, their mouths agape as they watched my mother, Phyllis, guide an elderly woman to a shelf of books inside the newly renovated Oakwood Community Mill. Their former expressions of smug superiority, once so familiar whenever my family was mentioned, had given way to unadulterated astonishment. They had come, no doubt, to gloat or to whisper, but found only quiet industry and genuine helpfulness. The mill, Raymond's brainchild and an anchor for our small town, thrived. It quickly became the heart of our community, a place where people felt comfortable, where they could learn and connect. My parents, Walter and Phyllis, immersed themselves in its management, their old desires for grandiosity replaced by a simple, profound satisfaction in contributing. Their days were filled with organizing book readings, assisting with the craft fair, and ensuring everyone felt welcome. I saw them often, my visits becoming more frequent, a quiet understanding blossoming between us that bypassed the unspoken pain of the past. A few weeks after the mill's opening, the town held a small dedication ceremony. Raymond, of course, was the guest of honor, but he made sure to highlight the collective effort that brought the mill to life. He spoke of community, of second chances, of dignity earned through honest work. My parents stood beside him, beaming, their posture no longer stiff with pretense, but relaxed and genuinely proud of what they were helping to build. After the speeches, people mingled, enjoying light refreshments prepared by local bakers. I stood a little to the side with Raymond, watching the scene unfold, a warmth spreading through me. Then a small group approached us. It was Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Cobb, and several other familiar faces from my parents' former social circle, people who had once either pitied my plight or openly scorned my parents' fall. Mrs. Henderson, usually a woman of formidable opinions, fidgeted with her purse. "Margaret, my dear," she began, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. She glanced at Raymond, then back at me. "And Mr. Vanderbilt, of course. We just wanted to say how truly remarkable this all is." She gestured around the bustling mill.
"And your parents, Walter and Phyllis, they've done such a splendid job. Who would have thought?" Mrs. Cobb, usually her silent companion in gossip, nodded vigorously. "Indeed, Phyllis has been so wonderful with the children's story time. Such a talent. We were so terribly mistaken about so many things." The words hung in the air, a quiet, almost shy admission of their past judgments, their voices lacking any of their usual sharp edges.
Their faces were flushed, a clear sign of their discomfort in uttering such a public admission. They were not offering a formal apology, not in so many words, but the sentiment was clear. Their smiles were genuine, perhaps a touch embarrassed, but utterly sincere. I smiled warmly at them. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Cobb," I said, my voice gentle and free of any trace of bitterness. "It means a great deal to hear you say that. Everyone deserves a chance to contribute, to find their path. Raymond squeezed my hand reassuringly, a silent acknowledgement of my words. Later that evening, after the last guest had departed and the mill was quiet, my mother approached me. She looked tired, but truly content. "Margaret," she said, her voice unusually soft, I know we made terrible mistakes. We truly believed we were doing what was necessary. We were so afraid." She paused. Her eyes, once filled with social ambition, now held a deep, quiet remorse. "You deserved so much more than what we offered. Raymond, he is a good man, a truly honorable man. And you, my dear, you are truly strong." She reached out and took my hand, a rare gesture of genuine affection. My father, Walter, stood a few paces behind her, his shoulders no longer slumped in defeat, but squared with a newfound purpose. He cleared his throat.
"Margaret," he echoed, his voice rough with emotion, "your mother and I. We are deeply sorry for the pain we caused you. We have learned a profound lesson about what truly matters." I looked at them both, truly seeing them for the first time in years, stripped of their pretenses, humbled but not broken. There was no need for grand declarations or dramatic forgiveness.
The steady, quiet work they were doing, the sincere remorse in their eyes, the respect they had earned from the community, and the love I felt for my husband, Raymond, were all the apologies I needed. I simply smiled, a genuine, forgiving smile, and gently squeezed my mother's hand. "It's all right," I whispered. "We all learn in our own time." The quiet dignity of their triumph, and ours, had finally come to pass. The genuine, forgiving smile I shared with my parents, and the warmth of my mother's rare, heartfelt touch, felt like the closing of a painful chapter. The Oakwood Community Mill, vibrant and full of life, was no longer just a project, but a symbol of a different kind of future, one built on honest effort and real connection. The next morning, I found myself waking with a lightness I hadn't felt in years. The air in our new home, the beautiful, stately Vanderbilt estate, felt fresh and invigorating. Raymond had already left for the city, immersed in the intricate world of business and reclaiming his family's legacy. He had encouraged me to explore my own passions, to find my own place in this new life, reminding me often that my intelligence and compassion were gifts, not burdens. My thoughts drifted to the mill. I had spent countless hours observing, assisting when needed, but now I felt a pull to contribute in a deeper way. My own love for literature, once a quiet solace in my constricted life, now felt like a resource I could share. So, after a light breakfast, I chose a simple but elegant day dress, suitable for an active day, and made my way to the mill, not as an observer, but as a participant ready to begin my own new chapter. The mill buzzed with a gentle hum of activity when I arrived. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the earthy scent of new timber and old books. Children's laughter echoed from a corner where my mother, Phyllis, was now gracefully leading a storytelling circle, her voice soft and engaging, a far cry from her former strained formality. My father, Walter, was busy organizing deliveries for the artisan workshop, his brow furrowed in concentration, but his demeanor calm and purposeful. I sought out the quietest corner of the mill, a small sunlit nook filled with shelves of donated books. This was to be my domain, the nascent community library. My first task was to organize the chaos, to categorize, to make sense of the jumbled collection of novels, histories, and children's tales. As I sorted through the volumes, my hands carefully handling each book, I felt a deep satisfaction. This wasn't about status or debt. It was about bringing stories and knowledge to people, a quiet, profound act of giving. A young woman, not much older than myself, with shy eyes and a worn shawl, approached me hesitantly. "Excuse me, Mrs. Vanderbilt," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I saw the notice for the reading group. I never learned to read very well, but I always wanted to. Would it be too difficult for me? I smiled warmly, my heart swelling with a gentle empathy. Not at all, I assured her, my voice soft and encouraging. We'll learn together. There's no such thing as too difficult when you have a desire to learn. I spent the next hour with her, patiently guiding her through the alphabet, listening to her halting attempts and praising her every small victory. The joy on her face when she finally recognized a simple word was more rewarding than any society ball I had ever been forced to attend. It was a genuine connection, a true shared moment of learning and growth. Later, as the afternoon sun streamed through the mill's tall windows, casting long golden shadows, I looked around the bustling space. My parents, once consumed by their desperate pursuit of appearances, were now at peace, their faces alight with a humble, honest pride in their work. The townspeople, once quick to judge, now moved freely, openly, through the space, finding connection and belonging. My own days of feeling like an object, a transaction, a pawn in someone else's game were over. I realized then what my previous invisibility had truly taught me. It was not just the pain of being overlooked, but the profound yearning to be seen, to be valued, to make a real difference. And now, I was seen. I was valued. I was making a difference, one book, one word, one shared smile at a time. I would never take for granted the simple, glorious dignity of a life lived with purpose, a voice finally heard, and a hand extended in genuine kindness. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your support is what brings these stories to more people.